My name is Kate Harmon. I'm the Director of Cross-Campus Engagement for the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship. And today on our Getting Ahead series, I'm very excited to have with us Ray Kato. Ray is the former Finance Director for SpaceX, the private aerospace company. So welcome, Ray. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kate. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's start off by talking a little bit about your earliest professional career. Walk us through your college years, both your undergrad and your grad at UO. What were you interested in at that time as a college student? What kind of activities were you involved in, and what did you think your career path was likely to be at that point as a college student?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't really know what I was going to do when I started college. So I grew up in Southern California. My dad went to USC, my mom went to UCLA, so real California thing. But I wanted to go away for college, so my dad sent me on a trip to visit various colleges, and as it turned out, the college I liked best was Colorado State University. And Oregon was a close second. So then I went to CSU for my undergrad years. And over time, I just decided to major in business administration. So that's kind of what I did during that time. I didn't, being in Colorado, no, I didn't go skiing that much, to be honest with you. I went a couple times. I was terrible. So I could focus on my studies a little more, I guess, from that standpoint. So, I was in some of the business fraternities back then, things like that. And then really what happened was I wasn't exactly ready to leave school after I graduated. And then I thought, maybe I should go do my master's now. And I talked to people and they said, well, you get more out of it if you go working first, which I totally agree with now. But at the time, I thought, yeah, but now might be the time to do it from an economic standpoint. Why not just do it? So then I went to, decided to go to U of O. Both of my schools, I'm really happy I went to both schools. I think I got a good education out of both of them. So the MBA program that I was in, I did focus on accounting. I understand that it works a little differently now after talking with Dean Nutter. But so I went, I was there I graduated in '85 from U of O. Really enjoyed it. I really like the outdoors. And so it's a nice place for people who like the outdoors. The education was good. Sports was terrible back then. So, it was a terrible sports school, very mediocre, not like today. So, but I really enjoyed my time there.
And what about accounting? Like, did you just think, oh, I want to work for a big firm, or what was sort of your overarching sort of goal once you got into the MBA program, like what you thought your career would be?
Yeah, I thought, to be honest, I thought, yeah, and probably if I'm going to focus on accounting, I likely will go the public accounting route to start. I'd be open to other things, but I thought that's really what I would end up doing at the end of it.
Gotcha. Well, and so let's talk about your very first job out of college, because that job was really, I think, reflective of your entire career in terms of how you often would take the a chance in a particular job, and you went down the road, I guess, less traveled, or the less traditional career path, if you will. So share with us a little bit about that first job and the kind of the context of how you got that job.
Sure. So I was, like I said, I was really thinking about doing public accounting. I did look at government or private industry a little too, but it all changed because I was a huge music fan. I still am, but back then I'm one of those kids who probably had hundreds of record albums, that sort of thing. So I sent out I had a friend who sent out blind resumes to some entertainment companies because she really wanted to work in entertainment. So I thought, that's a pretty good idea. So I sent one to some record companies, not movie studios, but record companies. And then I got a note back from Capitol Records in Hollywood, and it said, "Hey, we liked your resume. Would you be interested in interviewing?" So I went down to Hollywood, and the big tower of records, the stack of records the Capitol's known for,
Cool. Yeah.
that building. And I, lo and behold, I got a job offer. So,
Wow.
and so that's how I ended up there. It was totally not in the field that I would have thought. It was in cost and inventory accounting.
Okay.
And so that's not really what I thought I'd be doing exactly, but it was a phenomenal experience to be a young person, first job out of college, and my gosh, you're dressing however you want, so you could be in shorts and a t-shirt and you were fine there. Really didn't matter.
And then so
And
you got to see a lot of live performances or artists coming through the building and stuff like that.
oh, sure, yeah, you got to go to listening parties, and so, for instance, we went to a Tina Turner listening party, and she was really a nice person. I mean, kind of shy, but very nice. But that's the sort of thing you got to do. And we'd go to the culture there, which you kind of got in late. So we'd start about 9 or 10, 9:30, 10 o'clock. So you started late, worked, and then a lot of times you go to a concert at night. So that's kind of how it was. It was fun for a young music nut like myself. It was awesome.
I bet. That sounds amazing. Well, I think you were there, what, 4 years, right, at Capitol Records?
Yeah, about 4.5 years.
And,
Yeah.
and so at that point, you decided that you wanted to sit and you ended up passing your CPA exam, and you decided at that point to work for a CPA firm. And that firm was also connected to the entertainment company or industry. So can you share with us a little bit about your next role and what you ended up doing for that firm?
Sure. I think, yeah, you're right. I passed the exam, so I needed to get my CPA experience in. So that's why I went over there. They were interested in me because of my entertainment background. So they were, they had two main things. One was entertainment. So a lot of their clients were all of the labor unions, like SAG and AFTRA and Musicians Union. Those were all clients. And they also had production companies, like movie production companies and the like, that were big clients. And apparel would be the other big industry they were in. So there was two offices, New York and LA. The main office was New York, but of course I worked out of LA. And it was kind of right up my alley. So I spent most of my days at record companies or movie studios, and we would audit these entities for our clients. And so that's what we did. So I did a lot of traveling in those days. So we would go to, I spent a lot of time in Toronto, Atlanta, New York, of course. But LA has a lot of entertainment companies there. So that's where I spent most of my time. Got good experience there, but I kind of knew right away that, yeah, public accounting was not where I was going to spend the rest of my career. So
Very good. So let's then go to the next phase of your career. You decided that you wanted to get into being a controller at a company, and you ended up getting a job at a international company. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you learned and what you oversaw at that next company?
yeah. So this company was close to my house in the South Bay of suburbs of LA. And so it was an aerospace fastener company owned by a French company. And so I actually thought when I went over there, I was going to have a 4-day work week, which sounded really good. But my last interview to get the job was with a CFO from Europe. So he was from Belgium, I believe. And he said, I just took the job and I don't believe in a 4-day work week. So you're going to be my guinea pig and you're not going to have a 4-day work week. I said, oh, okay. And so that was an interesting experience. It was great because I learned about things that you really can't do unless you get down in the trenches and know how general accounting and financial reporting, consolidations, all of that stuff works. And as working for an international company also, it wasn't just GAAP. You had to, a lot of our stuff was IFRS, so International Financial Reporting Standards, accounting. And it was a little different. So it was a lot of work trying to figure out how I needed to make things happen so that our French colleagues would be happy with the work we did. So it was a good experience there too. So that was my next job anyway.
That was your next job. Well, that brings us then to how you got to SpaceX, which is an amazing story. I love this. Share with us what the whole opportunity looked like when you were interviewing for SpaceX.
Sure. So what happened was I knew that I was going to leave the French company. And so I was on 4th interviews with 2 other companies, 2 different headhunters were involved. And I was going to go on the Thursday and Friday of this week to have my 4th interview with each company. I was assured by the recruiter that, it's a slam dunk, you're going to get a job offer out of it. Okay, that sounds good. So at least it's almost over, 4 interviews, and it's a pretty grueling process. So on Tuesday, though, I had another headhunter call me up and said, and this headhunter was a really young guy. He was like 22 years old, and I didn't know if I should take him seriously or not. But he said, hey, I've got this really interesting company in El Segundo. It's a rocket company. They're a startup, so they haven't really done anything yet. But let me tell you a little bit about it. Have you ever heard of Elon Musk? And I said, no, I've never heard of Elon Musk. How about SpaceX? And I've never heard of SpaceX either. And he said, well, go do a little research, but I need to know right away. Give me a call like in an hour or so. So I went onto the internet and poked around a little, and I saw that Elon was the guy behind PayPal. And I thought, oh, sure, why not? I'm looking for a job, so I'll interview with him. So I called him back, and he called me back about an hour later, and he said, hey, can you go in tomorrow? They would like to meet with you tomorrow. And I said, well, oh, okay. Well, what do you know about the company? I don't know too much. I met with him, and he wasn't the most verbose person in the world. So I'm not really sure, but why don't you give it a shot? So I said, okay. So I go over to SpaceX the next day, Wednesday, and I get put in a conference room in El Segundo. And I was sitting in the conference room for 5-10 minutes, and then in pops Elon. I'd seen a picture of him. That's all I knew about him, really. And so we got to talking, and about 10 minutes into the interview, he kind of was kind of done. And I'm like, wow, okay. And so he leaves the room, and next pops in Gwen, who's now the president. She was the VP of sales at the time. So she pops into the room, and we talk for like 5-10 minutes. And then she leaves the room. And I didn't think any of the questions were very difficult that I've been asked so far. And so I was like, what is going on here? This is crazy. And then, but she had said, well, hold on a second. Somebody else has to meet with me. So next, Elon's assistant met with me. And again, 5-10 minutes. And it's, she said, oh, that's all the questions I have, and stick around. And so she leaves the room, and then Elon pops back in after about 10 minutes, and he said, okay, we decided to hire you. What do we need to do? And that's how it happened. It was just so crazy. I mean, it was not so unexpected.
That's
And so when I left the office, I called the recruiter, and he couldn't believe it. And he just said, wow, I had a feeling they might move fast at this place, but not that fast. That's how I got the job. It was just so crazy.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. I'm sure the other company was very disappointed after 4 interviews with you. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I got all 3 offers, and
that's amazing. So this was like 2002, right? This is what, around 2002, right?
Well, actually 2002 is when the company started.
Okay.
So I didn't start till 2005.
That's right. Okay. 2000.
So,
okay. So, and when you did join the company, SpaceX only had like 100 employees, and we're still pretty much in their R&D phase. Can you share with us a little bit about what was the company like at that point when you only had 100 employees? And then tell us really, which is most extraordinary, is what was your charge? I mean, you had an enormous charge that you had to oversee in this role.
Yeah. So what I discovered when I got there, well, my first day, I met with Elon, and he kind of laid out what he wanted me to do, and it was, I'm interested in having audited financials. Our cash situation's not the greatest. You need to really look at that very closely. Our tax returns are kind of a mess, so we're aware of it. So you need to work with our outside tax guy on getting that done. And then he said, but due to the cash situation we have, we're a startup, you can't really hire anybody. And so I'm thinking in the back of my mind, wow, audited financial statement, can't hire, I got to do it all myself. I thought, wow, this is going to be an interesting ride here. So, so that was my first day on the job. And then I delved into things a little more, and I found out that, okay, the only accounting system is they were paying bills on QuickBooks, essentially. And really nothing, they're not tracking inventory. They're not, it was, I realized then, wow, this is going to be a humongous task. So
absolutely.
It was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, to be honest. So.
Well, one of your biggest challenges was that Elon was self-funding the company, right? And he also not only had SpaceX running at this point, but also Tesla he was invested in, as well as Solar City. So can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to have, a single funder, and what that was like from a finance director's perspective, and some of the challenges that you had over time?
Yeah, so what really I found out right away after looking at the bank accounts is that, yeah, he wasn't kidding. I mean, we're really running on fumes, and there are books that have come out about him, and I think he's been pretty forthcoming about the difficulties he had back then about not having cash. So I can kind of talk about that a little bit. But our situation was this: if you have no money and you're not really getting that much in customer receipts because you're a rocket company and you've never flown a rocket before, and then your financial statements are a lot of red ink, and no bank is really gonna give you loans, most likely. Uh, I don't think he really wanted to take outside funding at that time. He had worked with private equity firms at, from his time at Zip2 and PayPal. So he knew what that entailed. So he wanted to go it alone if possible and keep control of the company totally. And so, yeah, that part was, there was a lot of heartburn in those days because we just didn't have money. And I really felt like I was a college kid back at U of O almost, because I really had no money to deal with. And so my big thing was, oh, I'm looking at things very closely, but if I needed money, I had to go to Uncle Elon and say, Elon, we need some money. And so that's what I had to do. And, of course, he didn't want to hear that, never. So that'd be like the last thing he wanted to hear. So he would usually give me a timeline on when some money would be available. But there were times, certainly, I don't think this is unique to SpaceX as a startup. Probably a lot of startups are this way. You just don't have the funds to do things. So you may have to slow your accounts payable, for instance. So I can tell you, I did not answer the phone for a while. I mean, all calls went to voicemail. I just did not answer it. And in a few cases, people would knock on our front door and the receptionist would kind of, hide away and just come up to me and say, hey, they're looking for you again. And I'm like, tell them I'm out of the office. I just can't take them, I can't meet with them. So I did a lot of that. So that was the early days of SpaceX. It was kind of like the Wild West in those days, because when you have 100 people, I'm a one-person department of finance, so I'm doing everything. But same thing in HR, same thing in IT. So there's a lot of one person, same thing in marketing. You have a lot of one-person departments back then. What SpaceX had, though, they had a lot of really smart people who were all working on this common goal to make our rocket company successful, right? So that was our common goal. And you had to, I can't tell you how many hours everybody worked. I mean, everybody worked a lot of hours. It was crazy. My wife didn't see me that much in those days. It was a lot of work. And frankly, we didn't know if we were going to make it. So Elon might have thought so, but I don't know about the rest of us.
That's scary. Well, you have a great story talking about how in March of 2006, when Falcon 1, the initial product offering for SpaceX, had its very first flight. Share with us a little bit of context on what was riding on that flight, because I believe you had said there was a country that was interested in developing this further and stuff. And so walk us through what it was like, because that's a really interesting story in itself.
Sure. Well, yeah, so 2006 had been 4 years since the company had started. And so the company was mostly engineers and some manufacturing people. So the admin people were, kept to a minimum. So they had worked really hard over these 4 years developing a rocket. It was called Falcon 1. It had one engine on the first stage. It's a two-stage rocket. So the idea is the stages will separate. And so first stage will come back down into the water somewhere, and the second stage will go up into space. I believe that one had a small satellite, a government-related satellite on it. Actually, I think it was an Air Force cadet satellite, which, so it was really a test thing. I mean, it meant a lot to the Air Force cadets, and I don't mean to, talk too lowly about that. But what we did is when we finally got it, we had news crews out on the first time we tried out, I can tell you, because then a small rocket company from El Segundo trying to launch. We were launching out of the Marshall Islands. We originally wanted to go out of Vandenberg on the Central California coast, but then some of the other tenants at the launch site there complained, and so we ended up getting booted, and we had to launch out of the Marshalls. And so we were, aside from the launch crew, the rest of us were in El Segundo watching it on this big screen thing. And when we finally launched, there was a few launch aborts leading up to it, but when we finally launched, we were just so excited. Everybody just wanted to see it fly and see what happens. And so people were jumping up and down and hugging and high-fiving. But about 30 seconds into the flight, the screen went black. And we thought originally, what does that mean? Is that video camera went bad or something? But it doesn't mean that usually. What happened was we lost power and the rocket came crashing down and landed in a million pieces in the water. So that's kind of what happened. There was a government, we investigated along with the government because I think a government agency, I think it's DARPA, had a little money into it. And so they concluded that it was, I think, a corroded nut that just broke apart, sprung a leak. We lost, we had a fuel leak, lost power, and that's why we crashed. And so what it really meant for the company was, though, we have a failure. And until you have a successful rocket, people aren't going to take you seriously. And I mean, back in those days, I'd go to an industry conference, for instance, and they would say, I'd meet with some competitors, and they'd say, "Oh, we're watching what you're doing. You guys didn't do too good." Yeah, thanks. And one of them said, "Yeah, we don't think you're going to make it, but if you do, we're probably going to just buy you." Oh, okay. So that's how it was back then.
Well, and it really was. So that was March 2006, and it wasn't until September 2008 with the flight number 4, which was the one that was actually successful. So compare that sort of viewing party experience. I mean, everyone must have been just completely elated. And how did the company's sort of financial future change after that successful flight?
It really did change. That was the huge thing. We, when Flight 3 failed a few months earlier, and we thought we knew what the fix was, so we got another rocket in right away. That was mostly done. We shipped it over to the Marshalls, and what we did know is that we were kind of really out of money, and this one really needed to happen for the company to continue. And I can only say that because I think it's been out in public before, but that was the huge one for us. And so what it did, when it was successful, I mean, we had gotten used to this disappointment a little bit from the first thing, but we were just so overwhelmingly excited. And I thought the launch happened like around noon our time. It might have been late morning. And so once that was successful, I can tell you the whole facility cleared out. I mean, everybody was gone. And so I think the bars and restaurants in El Segundo were probably overwhelmed by all of us. So, but that was such an awesome feeling to have it work.
Was the orders like kind of pretty soon coming in, or at least the interest in there in terms of finding a viable financial path forward after that?
Yeah, so what had happened, there were a couple of smaller entities who weren't really launching that much, who did sign up with us. They took a huge risk to do it, but they did. But most other companies were waiting. All the big boys in the satellite industry, the government, everybody was kind of waiting to see what would happen. And so the first big thing we got, though, in that was NASA. And so NASA had a program called COTS, so Commercial Orbital Transportation Systems. I think at the time they were looking for other alternatives to the shuttle. So the shuttle was a great vehicle, but it's very costly to send it up, $1 billion plus probably. So they were thinking, well, maybe if we get private industry involved a little, maybe they can do it cheaper and do a good job. And so COTS was really the first big contract we had. That, I'd say, changed the company quite a bit. And so, and that one, the thing was, the vehicle that needed to be used, it couldn't be Falcon 1. Falcon 1 was a test rocket, so had a very limited capacity on what you could take up. So it was really something called Falcon 9 that we were working on, a much bigger thing. And so that's what accelerated the development of Falcon 9. We had it in development, but we couldn't put much money into it until this happened. So Falcon 9 and this COTS program was really a big key to it. And, and eventually COTS turned out to be, we were successful in that. The end of the COTS program called for us to do some test flights. So that turned out well. And so we got the next one, the CRS, Commercial Resupply Contract, which was to take actual cargo to the station. So those were the key. I mean, NASA absolutely was a key to our success. But then we had other commercial satellite companies like SES would be one, for instance, who became interested once we became successful. So that was key for the company.
So the company starts to scale, and I know today SpaceX employs something like over 6,000 employees. What were, during those years of scaling, what was it like to, what kind of opportunities did you see? What sort of challenges did you have in terms of sort of now trying to build out a large scale team to oversee all the finances in this company?
Yeah, well, at the start, I think a lot of the challenges revolved around money still. So when we did finally get audited financials, which was really me, I did convince Elon to let me have a temp. So I got a temp to help me value the inventory at first, which was a crazy exercise of going into the accounts payable files and figuring out how much we paid for everything. But that was kind of the first thing as far as scaling is okay, we need a couple of AP people. We need a payroll person. We need a cost accountant. So gradually we scaled things up a little bit. But we still didn't have money in the early days. So we had to take a very slow approach. And it took a while before I could get the okays to hire additional people. So once we got to that point, we then we moved beyond QuickBooks. We put an ERP system in that it wasn't very robust, but it was good enough to get us by. So we did do that. And then I think having audited financial statements was helpful in one respect, and that is, even though it showed losses and everything, it showed where we were. And so one of the things we had to do in the early days was buy equipment. And it's expensive to buy equipment to build rockets. And to build prototypes. And nobody really, no bank was going to give me a credit facility or a lending facility. And so we worked with a lot of small equipment leasing companies. And I mean, we had tens of these things, but it's the only way we could get some of this equipment because we didn't have the money to buy it at the time. So I got used to a lot of rejection in those days because I'd knock on all these doors. I'd be knocking on the door and I can't help you. We can't help you. I mean, your financials are terrible, you know. I know, but so that's kind of how it was back then. And then finally, we got to the point where we were starting to have, okay, we had a successful Falcon 1. Maybe we had enough to try to get, let's say, a credit line. And then I think at that time, Elon was also thinking, okay, maybe now's the time to bring in a little outside money. And so that's what we did at that time is he went and brought some outside money in. I was finally able to get a credit line through, actually it was US Bank, after being turned down by, I don't know how many banks, a lot of banks turned me down. And so that was a sigh of relief, getting some money in the door finally. So that was huge. And then when we got, you know, when Falcon 9 was finally successful, that was the huge turning point. That was it, because that you don't make enough money off of Falcon 1 at that scale to really make it. But Falcon 9 was the vehicle that did it. So plus, and so that was a huge time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's a little about what we did in that period of time.
That's great. Well, we all want to know what is Elon Musk like? I know that you had shared earlier that you had the privilege, if you will, of sitting behind his desk for 2 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
What's your best Elon story? And is everything out there about the guy true or not?
Well, yeah, Elon is. I mean, Elon's certainly brilliant. There's no doubt about it. He's very driven. So all that stuff you read about, yeah, a lot of that's true. I mean, he's very, he doesn't, I can tell you back then we worked so hard and, you know, I definitely had my all-nighters occasionally and my 70-hour weeks. And, but just to, for me, you know, it was when you first start working for him, it's like, wow, okay, he's, how do I get on the same page as him? And how do I work with him best? And how do I connect with him? And sometimes it's not the easiest thing to do. But I'll give you a quick story. Finance, I don't think is one of the loves of his life. I mean, it's really not finance. He's really into engineering and design and all the things that SpaceX and Tesla do. But so we would have a finance meeting every week, and it used to be me, Elon, and Gwen normally. And then we would go through numbers, projections, and I can never remember the first time I ever gave him I finally came up with a balance sheet and P&L and cash flow statement. And I was pretty excited about it, but I mean, his eyes were kind of glazing over here. I don't think he was that interested in, but what I found after that point was that what he's really interested in is a cash flow from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So what money is coming into the company, what's going out, forecasted out for, you know, the next 12 to 18 months. Do we have any flat spots? If we do, what are we going to do about it? That's what he was really interested in. So once I figured that out, then that's kind of what we angled to show him on each finance meeting. But some of the finance meetings, you know, usually he was engaged, but occasionally he's got so much on his plate, so much on his mind that I can remember one time he was thinking, I was presenting, I think something to do with some event 4 months down the line. And then I looked at him and I thought, oh, wow, Elon's kind of, I don't know if he's listening to me too much. And I looked at Gwen and she kind of looked at me. I like to say. So I stopped for a second and waited because had his mind on other things. And then he comes back and it goes, I know what we're going to do when we get to Mars, and how we're going to make the fuel and what the fuel is. And, and most of the stuff went right over my head, frankly, from a finance guy. But that's kind of what I think things just pop into his head all the time. And I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like, it's just not a normal person anyway who would do that.
That's
It's
great.
amazing.
That's a great story. Well, you left the company a couple years ago, and I know that now you primarily spend your time mentoring and advising companies and startups. I wonder if you could share with us a little bit about what you look for when you decide to work with a company. What kind of things help, or is your screening process before you decide to spend time in working with a company?
Well, I think for me, I have to like the people who are running it. I mean, life's too short to deal with people who aren't good to deal with. So that's what I'm looking for. That hopefully they have a idea or product or service that looks like it's a good concept. It has a chance to be successful. So that's kind of what who I'm working with. And there's a couple companies that I'm working with where their management teams are on the ball. They just needed some validation sometimes, or they just want to run it by me, some concepts or procedures. So those folks I don't meet with very often, just from time to time. And then I do have one in particular right now where there's a company, it's a consumer product. I think the product has a chance to make it. I think it's got a chance. It's got a chance to go down the tubes too. And so the guy who's running it needs a lot of help from I think. So that's kind of why I'm a lot more involved with that one. So, but that's, it's good to help people that way, I think, too. So.
That's great. Well, my last question to you is, I mean, again, your career path is always kind of like choosing the untraditional path. I'm curious if a student out there is interested in sort of following a similar path as your own. Do you have any advice or recommendations? What do you think has served you well in building your career over these years?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, you're right. Don't be afraid to take the path less traveled. So just because everybody else is going a certain direction, like for me, when I got the capital job, and why I didn't choose public accounting, it's because sometimes you got to go with your heart or your gut and go with something that might be more of a risk, but could turn out later on. And so I think that's a good way to do. And when I took the SpaceX job, by the way, I don't think I mentioned this, but I actually took the SpaceX job offer, even though it was 20% less than the other two. So my wife thought I was crazy, and but I thought, okay, well, this is an interesting opportunity. I can learn from somebody like Elon, and why not take a chance now? Because even if it doesn't turn out, you can always get another job. That's exactly what I told my wife. I think I should take this. It's risky. It does give you stock options, which I'd never had in my career before. So that was definitely a motivating factor, because I figured out the people who had stock options at PayPal and Zip2 probably did okay. So that's one thing I would do, would say is, yeah, don't be afraid to take some risks that way. Uh, the other thing I would, I'm sure on your, all the people you've talked to, a lot of them have talked about their network. And that is really crucial, I gotta say, because it can lead you into other opportunities, or like in my case, when I think of how I got the SpaceX job, I knew somebody that somebody I used to work with, but hadn't talked to in years. He recommended me to talk to this recruiter, and this recruiter was at a consulting firm. I wasn't interested in the consulting firm, and I told the recruiter, yeah, it's not really my thing. But I kept in touch with them, and then lo and behold, a few months later, he came up with a SpaceX job for me, and that's how I got it. And it's incredible, these little things you do. So my advice is always keep your network up, use the golden rule, treat people well, and you never know what happens, because some people that you had no idea will lead you into this one direction. Could be, that's how I got really the capstone of my career, is that way. So.
That's amazing. Well, we will all be rooting for you and Elon on May 27th as they launch the first person into space from a private aerospace company. So good luck. Thank you. Ray Kato is the former finance director of SpaceX. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ray.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Appreciate it. Okay, take care.